Well, good evening, everybody. Good evening. Thank you so much for joining us here today. Have a full house. SRO. What does that mean? Standing room only. Because of me. What do you think? Huh? No, please. Anyway, I think that there are a lot of people who have not been to a lecture in this series before, which means that you have not had the pleasure of hearing me speak. Thank God. Thank God. But if we have not met before, let me just take a minute or two to introduce myself. My name is Robert Landau, originally from New York City. Hey. Where are those boos coming from? Long Island? Long Island.
All right.
Yeah.
Going there in a couple weeks.
Excellent. Well, tell them I said hi.
I'll tell them right now.
They won't know who the heck I am, but tell them I said hi anyway. There you go. Originally from New York City, was an actor for many years, then a cruise director for many more, all around the world, many times, 300 ports of call on 400 cruises, and now I am a professional speaker, americasfunspeaker.com. Yes, indeed, folks. Yeah, oh my goodness. You see, if you pay them well, they'll clap for anything. And we are in the midst of doing this wonderful series called Laugh Out Loud, America's Greatest Comedians. Tonight, it is my pleasure to speak to you on one of the greatest of American comedians, the one and only Kate Smith. Yes, folks, you're in the right place. No, of course, Jackie Gleason. It really did throw some people off. See, they're not from Staten Island. That's the thing. So here's how we'll proceed if you have not been to one of these before. This, folks, happens to be a lecture, but not the negative connotation of a lecture. Everything that's positive about a lecture, because when you combine fun and learning, you actually have a good time. And my goal here this evening, because everybody knows something about the great Jackie Gleason, but my goal here this evening is by the time I'm done, usually 4.5 hours from now, you will have learned a number of things about this great talent that you possibly didn't know before. And here's how we'll proceed. I don't consider myself an expert in anything that I speak about. Rather, I really enjoy doing research, and I have some for you tonight. And we will proceed that way as well. So, let's start off with a question. When you hear the name Jackie Gleason, folks, what words immediately come to mind? To the moon, Alice. Yes, that's one. What? About 18 of you said that. A bus driver. That's right. Away we go. That's right. Yeah. How did he do it? I can't do that. Yeah. It's kind of like walk like an Egyptian type stuff. Yes. Really, I don't think anybody could move like the great Jackie Gleason, so it's very difficult for me to imitate that. What else? What else? You're doing great. Huh? Art Carney. Art Carney, an incredible comedy duo. Yes, indeed. What else? Jane Meadows. Alice. Alice, that's right. To the moon, Alice. Huh? Trixie. Really, all of these names, all of these words are so familiar. If you really think about it, they're a part of our American culture. You know that that's an important series piloted by a very important gentleman when we can talk about it as if we're talking about family. Let's also continue with some things that the great Jackie Gleason is famous for saying. Here's the first one. Thin people are beautiful, but fat people are adorable. What an audience we have here tonight. They will applaud at anything. This is great. Here's another one. Drinking removes warts and pimples, not from me, but from those I look at. Here's another one. Modesty in an actor is as fake as passion in a call girl. Next one. The worst thing you can do with money is save it. Next up. I'm not advocating that everybody should drink. It just happened to work out for me. Next one. Many comedians have become good actors, but I don't know of many actors that have become good comedians. How about this? Anyone who thinks that all of this has to do with talent has got to be crazy. It takes a heck of a lot of luck, too. Now, the last two I have for the moment are ones that you've already mentioned. First one just starts with how. Yes, indeed. You want to say that a little louder? No. Just a little louder. I'm not asking you to get up and dance or, do Away We Go. Just say it a little louder so people can hear you.
How sweet it is.
How about a round of applause here? Now, was that so bad? You did great. You did great. Thank you very much for that. And finally, the one that a lot of you have been saying starts with and. Away we go. That's right. If someone were to come up to you, folks, and ask you who the names of famous people that shaped and formed the early days of television in this country, what names would you come up with? Also, if somebody were to come up to you and ask you to name some of the early pioneers of comedy in America in the 1950s, what names would you come up with? Of course, the names like Milton Berle, Bob Hope, Lucille Ball, and Jack Benny would definitely come up as well. But if you neglected to include the great Jackie Gleason in this mix, you're missing a huge piece of the puzzle. Now, if I said that very same thing to Jackie Gleason and even used the H word, huge, in my description, my guess is that he would probably chuckle and tell me that I definitely used that word wisely. How so? Yes, Jackie Gleason was just a little bit on the huge side, but he wisely used his size so very well when it came to how he moved. It was amazing, folks. You throw a little bit of Charlie Chaplin, mix it with a bit of Buster Keaton, and you've got a lot of what Jackie Gleason was so brilliant at doing. He could do a flip. He could do all kinds of balletic moves very, very, very easily. And he didn't mind, because he had control of most of the scripts, if his acting companions, his comedic companions, actually joshed about how huge he was. But there's another reason why I'd like to use the word huge when it comes to Jackie Gleason, and this is what it is. He was, is, and will always be a huge influence when it comes to the topic of comedy in America. Jackie Gleason, folks, was a huge part and foundation of what television comedy is to this day, and his huge heart and extremely sharp wit and mind were the perfect combination that made this one-of-a-kind guy one of a kind. Jackie was typical of a comedian of his time, if you think about it. What you saw was what you got. Nothing more, and certainly nothing less. In Gleason's case, so much of who he was is directly attributable to, does anybody know? Yes, very good. If you didn't hear what he said, his childhood. There was a direct correlation to that. Thank you very much for that. Well said. And I would add one word before that, his tough childhood, because that's exactly what it was. If you ask Mr. Gleason what were the things that he liked best in life, he'd probably say all of the finest things that money can buy. Jackie Gleason absolutely loved to live life to its fullest, and he did so in the form of fine food, beautiful women, good scotch. Now, mind you, this is not necessarily in any order, okay? And custom-made suits with a red carnation in the jacket lapel, and finally, intricately monogrammed shirts. Anybody know his given name? His given name? Most people don't. His given name was Herbert Walton Gleason Jr. Herbert Walton Gleason Jr., and he was born on February 26, 1916, in a very poor section of New York, specifically what borough? Starts with a B. Brooklyn. That's right, Brooklyn. That's right. His father was an insurance auditor, and his mother was a subway change booth clerk. If you were born in that time and lived in that area, you could expect actually to have a somewhat rough childhood. It could very well have been that Jackie just didn't know any better, and it was actually not uncommon to have the thought process and mindset of just making it day by day, day to day. How so? Get this. Jackie's older brother, Clement, passed away when Jackie was only 3 years of age. Jackie's dad, an alleged alcoholic, walked out, never to return again when Jackie was only 9 years of age. So there they were, Jackie and his mother, May. So, what do they do?
Join the circus.
You came up with a lot of good answers, actually. And really, what connected all of what you just said was that they worked hard at surviving day to day. If you asked Jackie's teachers in grammar school what they exactly thought of him, I'm not sure, I see a lot of you chuckling already, that they could actually share the specific words that they'd want to say or words that they had in mind. It just wouldn't be very appropriate or politically correct. Now, why do I say that? How about this? It is said that Jackie was a total mischief maker in school. How many of you admit that you too were total mischief makers in school? How many of you were perfect angels in school? Oh, look at you, look at you. Okay. Well, why do I say that his teachers would actually say that he was a total mischief maker? How about this? Someone once allegedly spread Limburger cheese on every radiator in Public School 73. I can't imagine who that someone might have been. So much so that the school actually had to be closed down for an entire day for the staff actually to clean that rather smelly mess up. Or, folks, how about this? Someone also once allegedly let loose a snake in the orchestra pit of a local theater. But when Jackie was asked to MC an 8th grade school show, he got bitten. Now, not by the snake, but by something else by the name of the show business bug. That's right. And about MCing in that specific play, Jackie once had this to say. I was in a graduation play in grammar school, and I got a laugh. That laugh is the greatest thing that could possibly happen to you. And if you can go out in front of an audience and do things that make them happy and that make them laugh, there's no greater thrill. The instant critic and thrill of laughter. And when he achieved that, he goes on to say, it is simply wonderful. There's nothing greater than that. Nothing. Or at least according to Jackie Gleason, there wasn't. He all of a sudden also remembered a time when his father took him to a silent film and vaudeville show at the same theater where years later he let the snake loose in the orchestra pit. When there was a break in the show, in that theater that day, young Jackie actually stood up from his seat and for some reason decided to turn around and face the rest of the audience. My guess is that he was sitting relatively close, so that when he got up and turned around, he all of a sudden got in contact with the energy of this entire theater. And everybody sitting there who, because he was standing up, he became a central focal point, and everybody was looking at him. What he got back kind of hit him in the face. And he never, ever forgot that moment. And all through his life and career, he would always say that from that moment on, he knew that whenever he was in an entertainment type situation, he would never sit as part of the audience this way. He would always stand in front of the audience this way. Interesting analogy when you think about it. There was one thing, though, at this point in his life that sort of stood in the way of him attaining this goal of standing up here facing all of you. What was that? Money, yes, but something even more immediate. Starts with an S. School. He happened to have still been in school, but that didn't last long. He actually dropped out of high school, hell-bent on pursuing a career in show business. But how would he get there? To help put food on the table, and here's where the job actually comes in, the money, Jackie had to be extremely creative and work very fast to help support his mother as well. To that end, he found himself working as a pool hustler, a professional boxer, and, get this, a carnival show barker. A carnival show barker. But there also happened to be a particular form of show business that was very popular at the time, an entertainment form that was unique, still is really, to America and America alone. Starts with a V. Vaudeville. That's right, vaudeville. Jackie knew that he had to be there, so he started to get work on the vaudeville stage wherever and whenever he could. Sometimes he would work up to 3, 4, possibly 5 shows a day in different theaters, vaudeville stages in New York City, Brooklyn, Newark, New Jersey, and anywhere else that he could just get to in a short amount of time. Since none of those jobs seemed fitting to make a lifelong career, the ones that I had mentioned before, he knew that his home would be on the vaudeville stage. To that end, he branded himself as Jumpin' Jack Gleason, and in that guise, in that character, he became an excellent vaudeville MC. So you can be sure that Gleason worked all facets of the vaudeville stage quite well. His specialty was actually bantering with hecklers in the audience until they kept quiet and paid attention, something I go through here at least 5 times a night.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Yes, okay. When you start to get good reviews and people start to know your name, you start to get better bookings as well. And that, of course, is just what happened to our boy. Soon Gleason would be gracing the stages of New York City's finest nightclubs. Jackie was known also as being a very fast study. What does that mean? He learned fast. What is it that he had to learn very fast, do you think? His lines, his one-liners, scripts as well. Well, actually, that is not easy. You know, people who are in soap operas, think about that. If they're a lead character and they happen to be in the soap opera 5 days a week, the amount of lines that they have to memorize is amazing. That's a talent, and it is something that not everybody can do. Usually, very seasoned performers can do that. Here, Jackie was just starting out, and he had that quick ability. Huh? A natural, you bet, you bet. So, because of this rare skill, Jackie got a gig as a comic at a place called the Empire Club. The Empire Club. And here's exactly what he was hired for. On Sunday morning, he'd be given a script. That night, he would have to perform that script on the stage. Well, okay, he could do that, but that idea, take that now and see if you can work it and fit it into things when you are not given any rehearsal time at all. Not very easy. And to make matters worse, the scripts that Jackie would have to study earlier in the day were hardly ever followed when it got to the stage that night, huh? Ad-lib was the name of the game. And for somebody who wasn't necessarily used to that, that could throw you into somewhat of a shock mode, you know? But he handled it very well. It would give him some incredible experience, but believe it or not, it rarely put a lot of money in his pockets. When his mother would pass on when Jackie was only 19 years of age, Jackie had all of about 35 cents in his pockets. But he kept working gigs all over the place. In 1936, he would marry a lady he met many years before by the name of Genevieve Halford. Genevieve Halford. Broadway would soon come calling, and Jackie would find himself in a show called Along Fifth Avenue. It opened to kind of mediocre reviews, but Jackie was really glad he had a part in this show on the one and only Broadway stage. He also still couldn't stop doing something. And it was an addiction for him. But I think this was a very positive addiction. What do I mean when I say that? Each night, after the final curtain of that Broadway show would fall, Jackie would sneak out of the stage door and he would hop a cab or hop a bus or walk to where?
The local pub.
Well, not the local pub. I'm sure he may have wanted to do that. But when you're in a performing mode, based on where he had come to from this point, what do you think? Vaudeville close. It was working the nightclub stage. He would, after that Broadway show would finish every night, go and work on nightclub stages doing comedy routines that he perfected while he was in vaudeville until the wee, early hours of the morning. He would say this about that: "I'd be lost if I didn't work on the floor until 2 or 3 in the morning." Well, there's a very famous studio mogul. I'll give you his first name. See if you can give me his last. First name, Jack. Warner. Jack Warner. And Jack Warner just happened to be sitting in one of those clubs early one of those mornings watching the great Jackie Gleason work. So, what do you think happened? Now, by a show of hands, how many think a film contract with Warner Brothers Studios was in order? By a show of hands, how many think nothing happened at all? By a show of hands, how many couldn't care what happened? Hey, 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 hey. We can get names and numbers, you know. Here's the answer. It was now 1941, folks, and Jackie Gleason just happened to be living in Hollywood. Hollywood. Warner Brothers signed Jackie to make some motion pictures. He would make no less than 8 motion pictures with Warner Brothers. Were these richly rewarding experiences for him? What do you think, folks? Let me go out into the crowd and get a feel for what you're feeling for this. My feeling is that most of you couldn't care at all. No, I'm just joking. I think you care, and I think you care deeply. Were these richly rewarding experiences? Actually, the answer is yes, but the answer also happens to be no. No, because the films really didn't do well or really speak well for Jackie Gleason. Yes, because guess where Jackie could be found after the filming would shut down each day of each of those Warner Brothers films that he would make? Nightclubs. Jackie knew in his heart of hearts that he needed to be doing this comedy thing that he loved in front of a live audience. That was home for him, and that's where he wanted to be. Imagine all of this going on with his wife and 2 daughters still living in New York. Suffice it to say that Jackie would end up separating from Genevieve. Jackie would move back to New York, and surprise of surprises, he would play even more clubs. Now, he even toured the country playing clubs, and a television role would soon be in the offing on the then Dumont Television Network. The year was 1949, and the role was Riley in The Life of... What a supremely educated crowd we have here this evening. Excellent. The role was recurring in that the show eventually became a weekly TV series. From that series, Jackie would go on to appear in something called The Cavalcade of Stars. The Cavalcade of Stars. He actually was called in to substitute for someone else as an MC for that show, but it actually became a full-time, somewhat secure job for Jackie Gleason. The show allowed Jackie as MC to clown around and be his natural comic self. He was also able to develop all of those incredible characters that he became so famous for playing during this time on that show. So he and his writers went to work And one of the sketches that they came up with actually had a storyline that was extremely close to Jackie's childhood memories growing up in Brooklyn. Gleason came up with this idea of a husband and wife struggling to make a life for themselves in Brooklyn. The couple would have plenty of arguments, which of course couples never have. Not in Brooklyn anyway. But by the end of the sketch, they would always make up because they genuinely, honestly, truly loved one another. So, what would they call this series of sketches? At first, they thought they might call it The Beast. The Beast. But nah, that didn't seem to work very well, actually. Then they thought they might call it The Lovers. But nah, that didn't seem to work very well either, actually. Then they thought they might call it The Couple Next Door. But nah, everybody say, nah. Very good. God, we've got more New Yorkers here than I thought. That title didn't seem to work very well at all as well. They settled on what? The Honeymooners. My goodness, you almost broke glass when you said that. Very good. The Honeymooners. And yeah, that seemed to work very well indeed. Thank you very much. A movie actress by the name of Pert Kelton took the role of Alice Cramden to start. Jackie would play, of course, Ralph Cramden, that's right. And another guy by the name of Art Carney would, in this first episode, this skit, would actually make a very brief appearance as a policeman who happens to get hit in the face with flour that Ralph mistakenly throws out of the window of that very memorable apartment that I know you can all picture in your minds as we speak. Of course, the sketch was a hit, and Gleason wisely decided to have it appear on the show a number of times. Every time the Cavalcade of Stars would air, so would a sketch featuring the Honeymooners. As the weeks rolled by, next-door neighbors in the sketch by the name of Ed and Trixie Norton, that's right, would pop by for a visit. Trixie, actually, was originally played as a burlesque dancer by a different actress that some of you may know by the name of Elaine Stritch. But that only lasted one episode. After that, does anybody know the name of the actress who assumed the role of Trixie? Not an easy question. Mrs. Norton. I think Jackie Gleason is probably laughing somewhere right now, you know. There's one in every crowd, and in this crowd, there are a whole bunch of you, let me tell you. Actually, her name, and you might remember it once I mention it again, is Joyce Randolph. Joyce Randolph. And she would assume the role as a perfect complement to her husband, Ed Norton. Does anybody know what his career was? Sewer. That's right. He was a sewer worker. He was a sewer worker. That show, The Cavalcade of Stars, did very well for the Dumont Television Network. However, folks, there were actually two problems with all of that. Problem number one, Jackie Gleason's contract with the network was about to expire. Problem number two, the network, Dumont, could no longer afford to pay Jackie Gleason and actually would fold altogether just a few years later. Now, anybody know what network came to the rescue? Anybody know what network the Honeymooners actually was on? Yes, CBS, that's right. CBS actually wanted Jackie in the worst way, and they could have him with a couple of stipulations. It wasn't stipulations, folks, that the network would actually make. It was stipulations that Gleason himself would make, because I have heard him say many times, when you're wanted, when your ratings are good, you can create the path that you want. When your ratings ain't that good, you get down on your knees and you beg. But he was in the former position at this point rather than the latter, and he probably said this, okay, I will only come to your fair network if you will let me create the show that I would like to star in. You will give me total control, and I will give you, in return, a bona fide hit. Get it? Got it? Good. Now, of course, Jackie was in the driver's seat, and he did quite well, thank you very much. He was in total control of the Honeymooners, from the casting, from the scripts, to the set design, to anything and everything having to do with the production of that show. By then, a new Alice Crandon was needed, and when the name, that's her sister, Audrey, good everybody, that's right. Audrey Meadows actually came up. Jackie Gleason said, no, won't work. Why? Because he thought she was too beautiful to play the role. So, actually, there are a couple of stories about this. One of the most popular is that, Audrey really wanted the part. She really wanted to work with Jackie Gleason, and she knew that this was going to be a major hit. So this is what one of the stories says she did. She hired a photographer one morning to come over to her Hollywood home and photograph her after she just got out of bed. So, now we can arrange it, folks. How many of you would like to be photographed when you get right out of bed tomorrow morning?
It's natural beauty.
Huh? It's natural beauty, yes. Thank you. Oh, you were talking about you. Yes. No, but that's really something. And when you think about being an actress in Hollywood, to allow that to occur, you know what? You're dedicated to your art. You know you want the role, and even more important, you know that if you get the role, you'll do a darn good job with it. That's what happened. It is said that when Gleason saw those photos, he said, that is Alice Crandon. And you know what? He didn't even know it was Audrey Meadows. Oh! The Jackie Gleason Show, not The Honeymooners in terms of a title, is what ended up airing on CBS in 1952, but the Jackie Gleason Show always featured a sketch of the Honeymooners. As the years went on, the sketches of the Honeymooners would last a little longer, and the Jackie Gleason Show would end up featuring one long sketch of the Honeymooners. The Jackie Gleason Show, folks. How many remember the Jackie Gleason Show? Yeah, incredible. So do I. It was in color later. In these years, it was definitely black and white. And by 1956, the Jackie Gleason Show was competing for the #1 rated TV show spot in the country. Anybody know who his main competition was in those years? I Love Lucy. I Love Lucy. That's right. Very good. We've got a great crowd here. People would line up for hours because, of course, the show was always taped live just to be a part of the audience experience watching this incredible show. The show would now air as The Honeymooners in a half-hour weekly series format. Jackie Gleason was in full and total control. And get his salary, folks. He was given a 3-year contract at an alleged $11 million. Now we're talking about the 1950s, folks. He would also, on top of that, get paid $65,000 per episode, but, you know, there's always a but. He would have to, with that $65,000 per episode, pay all production costs with that weekly amount, such as his cast's salaries. Art Carney would get $3,500 a week. Audrey Meadows would get $2,000 a week, and Joyce Randolph would get $500 per week, but she didn't appear in every show. The first episode of The Honeymooners aired on October 1st, 1955, and was taped in front of a live audience in New York City. The show, of course, was an unqualified hit, with just about every scene occurring in Ralph and Alice's sparse Brooklyn apartment, and with only 4 main actors, the show really wasn't very expensive to produce, if you actually think about it. Strangely enough, after only 39 episodes, Gleason and his writers were ready to close the show down. CBS, as you can well imagine, was absolutely shocked. And they actually couldn't figure out why, so the first thing they went to was, well, you know what? He's got to have another job. Why would he want to stop this? He's on a roll. It's doing so well for him, and it's doing so well for us. Well, you know what? It actually wasn't the issue of him having another job. What really was the issue was that Jackie and his writers didn't feel there was anything left to do with the storyline after those episodes were shot, and they wanted to stop the show for creativity reasons while the show was still on top. He said, "The excellence of the material couldn't be maintained, and I had too much fondness for the show to cheapen it," he would often say. Jackie, this is how good a businessman he was, actually ended up selling all films, because that's how they made them those days, of those 39 Honeymooner episodes. He sold them to CBS for $1.5 million. It's a New Yorker for you, huh? He was then, I wonder if anybody remembers this actually, because he used to talk about this often, and he probably, if it were anybody else, probably shouldn't have. He was convinced to try a game show next, and after its very first episode, it bombed. Major, with a capital M. Think about it. You have all this success with those 39 episodes, your name is known around the world, you have all this money, and the very next thing you try after the first episode tanks in a huge way. Folks, this was a colossal failure. The show was called You're in the Picture. You're in the Picture. And when I describe it to you, you'll understand why it was such a colossal failure. Celebrities were supposed to appear on every episode of You're in the Picture. You know those cutouts at the beach that have the hole to put your head in? Well, there would be a cutout scene, and the celebrity would have to put their head in this hole, and then they would have to guess what the scene was that they had poked their head into. Oh, God. Well, probably, my guess is, after 5 minutes of being on the air with that show, and Johnny Carson was one of the first guests. If you go onto YouTube, you can find a clip of when Jackie Gleason appeared on The Tonight Show with Johnny Carson. I think it was 85 or 86, and he actually talks about this. There's also a very famous 60 Minutes interview with him where he talks about this, and he goes, you know what? I knew this thing was a clunker. And here is the integrity and professionalism of this man, and it totally went against the grain. He went to the network moguls right after that taping and said, you know what, this show stinks. I feel that way. I can only imagine the celebrities who participated in that one show feel that way. I can't imagine what the audience who saw that show live and watched it on the air feel as well. You know what, guys? There is no way I can go through with this game show next week. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to sit in a chair, the camera will go on, and I will apologize for what I did to our nation's viewers last week. CBS was stunned, and they said, no, you won't. No entertainer in the history of television has ever gone on the air apologizing for a show that we all put on together. He said, yes, I am. They said, no, you won't. He said, yes, I am. And they danced just a little bit until, because my guess is Gleason still had amazing clout, they let him do it. And you know what? People to this day will say that it's probably the funniest and most entertaining 30 minutes that Jackie Gleason has ever done. The rest of the season, in that time slot, that show would become a talk show instead. Well, Gleason knew he couldn't stay away from comedy TV for too long, and he returned to the air with another variety show that eventually wound up in a color format. So he said, you know what? We're going to do this show. It's going to be a smash hit for you. However, we're doing it in Miami Beach. The CBS exec said, no, you're not. Jackie said, yes, I am. No, you're not. Yes, I am. The waltz music started up again, and guess who was in the lead and who won? Jackie Gleason, that's right. So, because they didn't want to relocate to Miami Beach, Audrey Meadows and Joyce Randolph were replaced. Does anybody know who replaced Audrey Meadows as Alice Cramden? I remember this so well, and it's the only role that I ever associated with this lady too. Yes, very good, Sheila McRae. Sheila McRae. And Trixie was played by a lady by the name of Jean Kenyon. Yes, good, wow. This newer version of the Honeymooners came to an end in 1970 when Jackie wanted to keep it as a sketch in the variety show format, but CBS wanted Jackie to do an hour-long version of the Honeymooners all by itself. Jackie said no, CBS said yes. I should have worn my dancing shoes for this, but actually in the end, this time, CBS, well, they kind of lost because nothing ended up happening. Jackie left the network. A couple of interesting things that you might not know about the original black and white version of The Honeymooners are, as I said, the show was filmed before hundreds of people who wanted to see the show live every week. There were not any rehearsals for any of the episodes. Lines, and you can see this very clearly if you watch. Now you can get a CD box set of most of the complete 39 episodes, actually. And if you watch carefully, folks, you'll see everybody lose their lines. But they don't really care. They forgot their lines. They screwed them up often. If Jackie Gleason would, huh?
That's what made live television funny.
That's what made live television funny, but even with live television, you could rehearse. But it actually made it more original. That's right. Without that. If Jackie Gleason would forget a line, you know what he would do?
Blame it on Scotch.
He not blame it on Scotch, no. He would actually pat his stomach. And that's how the other cast members knew in this live situation that he needed help. Audrey Meadows, if something needed to be gotten from that little fridge in the apartment, and if somebody forgot to do that, she would just look at the fridge until somebody thought, oh my goodness, I got to get the milk from the fridge. Thank God she reminded me. Gleason also wrote that very famous theme song to the show. There were actually lyrics to the song, but of course they never were sung when you saw the Honeymooners. Does anyone remember how that tune goes?
Was racing with the moon, wasn't it?
I don't know. He had a name for it. It was something like that. Does anybody remember that tune?
Yeah, that was the song.
Do it again. Now you did it the first time. Yeah, do it again.
Do 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 do.
Hey, can we have another round of applause? I'm always absolutely stunned by the caliber of talent that we have at these dues, you know. Yes, it was da 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 da. Do you remember that? Yeah, if you saw it, and remember the firecrackers were exploding at night, so on and so forth. Gleason wrote that theme. And also, I bet many of you don't know this, that Jackie Gleason was an extremely popular recording artist in the 1950s and 60s. In fact, some of you might have had his recordings in your library, did you? You know, I can't remember the exact title, but his most popular release, which is still popular this day, is called for Lovers. Now she remembers. There you go. Do you still have that? You do. How is that album? It's beautiful. I bet. Did you have that album in your collection? Yeah. Yeah, he really recorded some wonderful, wonderful albums. He released, get this, no less than 43 albums of what then was called mood music. As far as the silver screen went, altogether Gleason would star in 9 major motion pictures. He was a very accomplished dramatic actor, and some of these films showed how talented he was as a serious actor. In the 1980s, Gleason would star with Richard Pryor in a film called The Toy, and with Burt Reynolds in a 3-film series. Does anybody remember what the title of? Smokey and the Bandit. That's right, you bet. His final film was with the one and only Tom Hanks in 1986. It was called Nothing in Common. Final, because during filming of that flick, Gleason was battling colon and liver cancer. We lost this great, great man and great comedy talent on June 24th, 1987, when he died peacefully and quietly at his home. The great Jackie Gleason was 71 years young. There are a few more things about this great man that you might not have known before. Gleason married 3 times. The 3rd marriage was a keeper. He loved to drink and smoke, and did so on a rather frequent basis. He had an alleged, and I knew nothing about this, I wonder if you do, he had a major alleged interest in the paranormal. The paranormal. He had a huge library of paranormal books in his home, and get this, he also believed in UFOs to the point where he had a house built in the shape of an alien spaceship, and he called that home the Mothership. It gets even better. Gleason's 2nd wife mentioned once that President Nixon took Gleason on a secret visit to Homestead Air Force Base, where he allegedly saw an alien spaceship with dead aliens as well. Bet you had wanted to keep all those recordings now, huh? In closing, folks, well, I'd like you to understand, if you don't know already, just how special this one-of-a-kind guy really was. Jackie Gleason knew who he was and what he was capable of doing. His brand of humor was totally unique. The great Steve Allen once said this: He makes you feel actively and emotionally sorry for him. Few other comedians had the talent to do that. Jackie gave us a piece of his rough and tough childhood and made us laugh about a very, very difficult and what must have been painful situation for Jackie in his past. Did you know that the Crandon's address in the Honeymooners was the exact same address where the Gleason family used to actually live in Brooklyn? He gifted us with a real-life couple with not one bit of Hollywood chintz and glamour to their names. They were real. They were real. Ralph and Alice Crandon bickered in a very realistic way long before Archie and Edith Bunker bickered in a very realistic way. As a matter of fact, Carol O'Connor, another great Irish-American actor that, of course, played Archie Bunker in All in the Family, once wrote a letter to Jackie Gleason that said, "I know I'm doing a lot of the things that you did." Gleason then sent O'Connor a letter saying, "I wish I did a lot of the things that you're doing now." My hope is that Jackie Gleason never had any regrets. Why should he? It takes a lot to be an American comedy icon, but that's exactly what I think Jackie Gleason was and always will be. Orson Welles, the great Orson Welles, put it best when he called his friend Jackie Gleason the Great One. And boy, was he right. Johnny Carson, a huge fan, once asked Jackie why he thought the Honeymooners is still so very successful. And you know how Gleason responded? He said two immensely important words when it comes to the subject of American television comedy, and they are, "It's funny." Enough said, don't you think? Thank you.